My name is Marsha Ellison, and I'm from the Transitions Research and Training Center at the UMass Medical School. I am presenting today on the Survey of Innovative Practices. So the Survey of Innovative Practices is a one component on the Helping Youth on the Path to Employment study called HYPE. HYPE is funded by the National Institute on Disability and Rehabilitation Research. And is also directed by Michelle Mullen, who is sitting here. So she is the PI of HYPE, and Transitions RTC is subcontracted to Rutgers University to conduct one component of the HYPE project. Okay, so HYPE has 4 components. There is a scoping review, a literature review, and then there's a set of qualitative interviews with young people. And you'll be hearing the results of those things coming shortly. And the third component is the Survey of Innovative Practices that I'm going to be presenting on. All those 3 components are intended to result in a manual and training program for for career development for young adults. So career development we are defining as both education and employment outcomes for young people ages 18 and up with serious mental health conditions. So the Survey of Innovative Practices, I'm going to describe the purpose and the method. We were really intending to get a look at the landscape, but we know that it takes a while for research to get out there to tell us how what the evidence-based practices are. We were trying to look at the laboratories of actual programs who are innovating to figure out how to serve this population, how to do career development for young people. First we did a nomination of programs. It was really a snowball sampling technique using the advisory council to the HYPE program, and nominations from other programs who nominated other programs, and so forth. First, we did an internet survey and asked nominated programs to respond to us. That was really sort of a screening eligibility attempt, and also to get some basic information. If they were eligible, we followed up and agreed. We followed up with semi-structured telephone interviews, which were transcribed. And then we did there was a qualitative analysis that I'm going to present to you. It was a 3-person team who did open coding of all the transcripts. That's myself and Rachel Stone. And Sloan Huckabee was our 3rd person who unfortunately was not able to attend right now. So Rachel and I will be presenting today. We did an open coding using in vivo. We coded every little piece of data that looked possibly relevant, and used a 3-person team to begin to develop consensus on the larger categories of what those pieces of data were referring to. We developed over 100 codes that way, which is a very unmanageable set of data. So our next attempt was to begin to try to group these data. I'll get to the Kohler taxonomy in a moment. First, I'm going to describe the 31 programs that we wound up interviewing. Just to briefly describe the programs that we talked to. This is the regional distribution. I have to say there's a predominance there in the Northeast where we're from, but we did have a distribution across the country. The majority of programs were limited to transition-age youth, ages 16 to 30, and the remainder were sort of an all-age type, served all ages in their program. We asked about how long do people typically stay in their programs. So the majority there is 53%, 1 to 3 years, gives you a picture of what type programs are doing, and the next largest majority there is for less than 1 year, 6 to 11 months. Racial composition, the majority, 62%, were their majority of their clients served were white, and the next largest category is 29%, having no particular racial predominance, it was distributed evenly among the white and minority groups. Okay, so I referred to the application of the Kohler taxonomy. We had these 138 codes, and we decided to use the Kohler taxonomy to develop axial codes, meaning that these were the very sort of the large branches under which we began to group our data. So this is the actual Kohler taxonomy. This was really developed for transition planning, and it was really meant for secondary students, special education students, and how to do planning for them to move into post-secondary outcomes. And she developed 5 major categories here. There's the actual planning activity. There's how to involve family. There's the elements of the program. She described interagency collaboration and also student development. And that was the actual sort of skills instruction and ways to develop skills with students to be able to move them forward. So we adopted these 5 major categories as a way to group our data. However, within them, we were able to keep many of her subcodes, and some of them we needed to adapt to fit our data better. So what I'm actually going to present quickly is our data according to these 5 categories. So I'm going to begin with young adult focused planning. And there were 2 subcodes here, the actual planning process and student participation and communication, which we grouped under planning really for a lack of a more appropriate code. I'll describe both of those to you. So young adult focused planning, virtually all the programs described doing a planning effort with young people, sat down and actually sort of figured out what kind of goals you had and how do we get there and what are the steps. So this was a very deliberate process. We noticed that the plans had a functional orientation. So all of these programs were asking, what's your employment goals, what's your education goals, what's your independent living goals. So these were not goals like we were describing in terms of, how do you get from 3 to 1 in terms of, your anger outbursts. Or these were not diagnostic goals whatsoever. These were functional orientation planning. People described that their planning used person beyond the diagnosis. The same aspect is that we were dealing with young people, not first episode, not schizophrenics. We were trying always to sort of refer to people as people. The goals were client-centered. This always came from the clients. We were working very directly with young people to help them define their goals. They were individualized and they were strengths-based. A major part of young adult focused planning was disclosure. There was a lot of time spent in the programs. How do you disclose to your employer? What do you say? Should you, shouldn't you? What are the pros and cons? And also in your education setting. And financial aid planning was another piece of young adult focused planning. People were figuring out, how do you get to school? How do you apply for financial aid? And try to get the financial aid package together. So we have a quote here that we think illustrates what some of the young adult focused planning was like.
It seemed to me to be much more focused on teaching someone to be a successful adult rather than how do you sort of cope with having a system of care for your whole life. I like the emphasis on self-determination in teaching.
Thanks, Rachel. So participation and communication, there's definitely there was a stress on youth voice and including youth in the administration, within the programs, governance. And of course there was a lot about how do you communicate to young people. This is not remarkable to all of you who are working with young people. Rachel?
You can call them all day long and not get a response, but if you text, they get right back to you. They don't like getting on the phone to talk. Communication also sometimes looks like anything, anytime, anywhere.
So, right. So if you, we heard repeatedly, if your agency doesn't permit texts, you've got to find a way, you've got to find a workaround. You've got to text with young people if you want to communicate with them. Similarly to social media, you know, you've got, we heard the staff need to be comfortable using Facebook and Tumblr and the rest of them. If you want to work with young people, you got to work with the technologies that they use for their own communication. Okay, another component is family involvement, and I'm going to switch with Rachel here.
So, family involvement includes psychoeducation, which is the main thing they talked about. Many programs emphasize the importance of involving the family in the young adults' mental health treatment. But they also define family pretty widely, not necessarily the nuclear family, but the people that the young person considered to be their main supports. It was also used to help families effectively understand and support their young person, in addition to learning about mental illness and the management of mental illness. Benefits counseling has to involve families. It's kind of a coin with one side. The family depends on the young adults sometimes for their benefits, which I think you guys talked about. Conversely, young adults depend on their families for insurance and other types of coverage. So to have an effective conversation, you have to involve both the family and the young person.
So I would really emphasize again that you have to work with families. There's no way to do this work without working with families.
Okay, the next main component of the taxonomy is young adult skill development, which includes these main 7 components that I will go into now. Life skills in construction is possibly the most broad, and starts with things like barriers, skill building, and self-advocacy. Barriers that were mentioned covered a whole wide range of things, such as interpersonal barriers like distrust and discrimination, or intrapersonal barriers like internalized stigma. This quote from a program kind of highlights the stigma.
They want to live their lives. They don't want to be different than others. They want to be like their peers.
Other barriers that we found to be pretty prevalent were financial barriers, such as issues with loans or issues getting financial aid for school. Skill building was seen as an essential piece of service provision, whole wide range of skills. Coping skills were important and helped teach the youth how to effectively manage their mental illness, as well as stress and other things that come with being a young person. Kind of talked about financial barriers, some skills necessary to combat those is learning how to manage a checking account or savings plan, and just learning how to use your money once you're employed, getting a steady income, how to effectively budget. Executive functioning was brought up quite a bit. It includes providing skills such as organizing, memory, sensory regulation, planning, as well as contributing to building time management skills and calendaring, and how to use a syllabus, that type of thing. And finally, self-advocacy was really stressed as being a shared decision-making between the young person, program, family, everyone being able to, talk it out, as well as the increased necessity as a person transitions between services, how to advocate for themselves and get their needs met. So employment skills focused on how to build a resume, as well as how to dress an interview for a job, which was also often done through role play and mock interviewing?
We just help them in doing the applications and how to do some of the soft skills of using good eye contact and shaking hands and asking questions and dressing, all those sorts of things for interviews.
Programs also hope to instill positive work ethics and reliability, as well as skills for interacting with coworkers and employers.
It's not always difficult to get an entry-level job, but often they have trouble with social interaction or symptom management. They might have a relapse or they might have difficulty tracking the details of the job, so losing a job is pretty common.
So building off of that, structured work experience, the employment skills factor quite a bit into this. Internships and other work experiences were provided by a lot of programs. Sometimes young adults were brought around to businesses to job shadow, just get a feel for the workplace.
We would actually market the student to the employer and offer to pay the wages, workers' comp, we cover those things.
So that was used kind of as an incentive for businesses to employ the young person if they don't have the responsibility of actually paying and covering that type of things. They're more likely to let the young person in and just get a feel for it without the added necessities of compensating them. In terms of supported employment, many programs stress the goal of rapid job placement. Didn't always matter if they kept the job, but like getting them in feet first.
You can't do fix them first and then get them employed. I'm totally sold on employment taking the lead. It's really what the young adults want. They want money, they want employment. It's a way to normalize things. There's just so many strengths to focusing on employment first, and then everything else kind of falls in around it.
So, education skills provided included assisting the young adult in applying to schools and applying for financial aid, as well as helping them access campus and community resources. Additional skills are things like organization, which I touched on earlier, using a planner, reading the syllabus, average college-y type things that people should be learning.
Some essential and ongoing support, such as applying for financial aid, admission, how to get books and supplies, how to get to class, transportation, class scheduling, familiarizing with the institution, introducing people to resources on campus, accommodations, personnel, tutoring services.
Some additional interpersonal skills were how to communicate with a professor, and how to figure out how to get your needs met, as well as making the adjustment to the academics and social life of college, which is difficult for any young person, let alone a person struggling with mental illness as well. Special education came with extremely mixed reviews, as you can see from this quote.
In most cases, we do 504 accommodations rather than have them transferred to special education. In fact, we decided to make sure they don't get special education. It's absolutely the wrong environment for them.
On the other hand, some programs considered it as a good mechanism for identifying students in need, as well as delivering services to them. Vocational schools provided things like technical education to promote employment, and sometimes allowed students to receive a certificate in particular fields like cosmetology, masonry, carpentry. Support services. Virtually all the programs were engaged with helping the young adult access and utilize services and accommodations, both formal and informal accommodations. Formal accommodations, mostly education related, like getting extra time on exams or having someone take notes in class for you. Employment accommodations were often framed informally.
We don't even call it accommodations. We just say, do you think it'd be possible if this person could start at 10 o'clock instead of 9:30? Because we might say it just works better for them to start later. We don't really like to use the word accommodations as much as just saying, do you think this will work?
That kind of ties into normalizing. So motivational interviewing and motivation enhancement help bring the young adult through the stages of change and create motivation for employment, as well as motivation to actually accept support. Motivational interviewing techniques were used by a lot of the programs, especially around issues of substance use. One program is quoted as saying,
What we experience in the beginning is that families are usually very motivated to do what they're told. They're often kind of desperate. But the young person is often kind of scared and is really not certain that they want to have a relationship.
various types of therapies were offered not necessarily by specialists, but like the different models were integrated into the program. And lastly, peer support and use of peer mentors was stressed as a positive for the group, for the programs that were actually using it, because peers get it, as they say, and provide a form of support that other can be offered by, regular adults.
A visitor asked one of the peer members why the group was so important, and the member of the group said, well, let me put it this way. So I came in a while ago and I had shaved off my eyebrows. And this other person said, hey dude, what's with the eyebrows? And my response was, psychosis. And the other guy said, oh, cool. It's like, okay, so you shaved your eyebrows because you got psychotic. I get it. It's not a problem.
So lastly, we have psychoeducation and social aspects. Touched on psychoed a little bit earlier with family involvement. It can also be used to help the individual understand their diagnosis and how to manage their symptoms, as well as coping skills that we talked about a little earlier, and treatment options, medication, and just how to deal with providers, which can be tricky. Social aspects include things like youth-run groups, which offer a nice outlet for self-expression, like the guy who shaved his eyebrows. And for at least one program, they said they're able to find a network of friends here, and that's kind of just a baseline, somewhere to be. And so I'm going to hand it back over to Marsha.
So I'm going to run through some of the program characteristics, but we have limited time, so I'm going to sort of highlight the most important things. As I mentioned, the focus is educational and vocational supports, also social skills and related independent living supports. There's a general sense of recovery and community integration as the program focus, pursuing a quality of life goal outside of a mental health status. The kinds of models and approaches that were used, transition to independent process, the TIP program was named by many programs. So was individual placement and support, IPS. A lot of people are just using IPS straight out of the box. Supported education didn't have a model per se, but people were providing educational supports every which way they could figure it out. I want to mention something about the engagement and retention. Everyone knows this is a population hard to engage. There was an emphasis on building relationships, service flexibility for no-shows or service gaps, always being there for the student. They can leave, come back. They aren't punished for 3 no-shows, you can't come back kind of thing. There's assertive outreach in the community. Lots of programs have their people literally out in the community trying to find the youth, engage them, bring them in, meet them. There is a stress on a non-treatment environment for your program, and also younger staff who have a good connection with the youth culture. So I think these 2 things I want to emphasize here. We heard this a lot, meeting them where they're at. Literally service provision in the community, mall, home, or school. Rachel, can you?
Yep. We've had people who are literally unwilling to come out of their room. In fact, we had one fellow who was literally in his closet, and we did a series of home visits, and we had communicated with people using sticky notes, you know, so we're all about as flexible as we can be.
And also figuratively meeting them where they're at, responding to their felt needs and goals.
Let's say you want more money, you want a car, you want a girlfriend, and that's what we're about. And we'll come in from the backside to say, what kind of mental health issues get in the way for you to get a girlfriend or get a job, which may have been a quote from the Stars.
Okay, we are at the end of our hour. There is a tremendous amount of interagency collaboration in the community with mental health and both rehab. And I'm going to wrap it up here. Please see me or Michelle Mullen if you have more questions about the Survey of Innovative Practices.